Where do your thoughts come from? Have you ever truly seen their birthplace? Do they ask your permission before appearing? Do they consult you before changing their direction, tone, or intensity? And when a thought fades away, where does it go? Do you escort it out? Or does it vanish on its own? If thoughts were truly yours, you should at least know where they come from and where they disappear. And yet, from morning to night, thoughts arise uninvited, linger briefly, and dissolve without leaving an address behind. It is from this silent mystery that one seeker, troubled and sincere, once turned to Ramana Maharshi and asked a question that sounds simple, but carries the power to dismantle the entire sense of personal bondage. Master, these thoughts torment me. How can I stop them? Maharshi did not answer in the way the mind expects. He did not offer a technique, a discipline, or a method to control thought. He did not say, suppress them. Nor did he say, replace bad thoughts with good ones. Instead, he looked directly at the root and said, with disarming simplicity, to whom do these thoughts arise? This was not a clever reply. It was a surgical one. Maharshi knew that the real problem was not the thoughts themselves, but the unquestioned assumption that they belong to someone. The seeker had already assumed, without investigation, these thoughts are mine. Maharshi's entire teaching was aimed at exposing this single, unnoticed assumption. The seeker persisted, but they arise in me. I feel them. They disturb me. Surely they are mine. Maharshi did not deny the experience. He denied the conclusion. He would often say that experience alone is not bondage. Misidentification is. Thoughts arise, yes. Sensations arise. Emotions arise. But where is the proof that they belong to a personal owner? Maharshi pointed out that ownership is never experienced directly. It is only thought. A thought claims another thought. One idea declares, this is happening to me. And that unexamined declaration becomes the root of suffering. Maharshi often explained that thoughts are like clouds passing through the sky. The clouds are visible, the sky is not troubled. The mistake is not seeing the clouds, it is calling the sky a cloud. When the seeker identifies with thought, he feels imprisoned by it. When he sees that the thought is an object appearing in awareness, the prison walls collapse on their own. This is why Maharshi repeatedly emphasized that thoughts are not the enemy. Trying to destroy them only strengthens the one who feels threatened by them. Instead, he urged seekers to inquire into the thinker. At this point, the seeker asked, but if I don't stop thoughts, won't they multiply endlessly? Maharshi gently dismantled this fear. He said that thoughts draw their strength from attention and identification. The moment you stop feeding them the belief, this is mine, they lose momentum naturally. Not through effort, but through understanding. He compared thoughts to thieves who flee when the householder wakes up. Not because the householder attacks them, but because their opportunity disappears. Another seeker once asked, if thoughts are not mine, then whose are they? Maharshi's response was subtle and precise. He did not say they belong to some higher power or cosmic mind. He said, in essence, that the question itself assumes ownership where none has been established. Thoughts arise due to tendencies, impressions, and conditioning, but none of these constitute a personal self. They are movements in nature. appearing in consciousness. The mistake is turning these movements into an identity. Maharshi would often say that the I thought is the first thought, and all other thoughts follow it like a procession. This, I thought, is not the true self. It is the sense of individuality that arises when awareness identifies with the body and mind. When a seeker asks, "How do I get rid of the I thought?" Maharshi replied that you do not get rid of it by force. You trace it back. You ask, "Who am I?" Not as a mantra, not as repetition, but as a living inquiry. When the inquiry is sincere, the I thought turns inward and dissolves in its source, just as a river disappears when it merges with the ocean. This is why Maharshi said your thoughts are not yours, not as a philosophical statement, but as a factual observation available to anyone willing to look. If a thought were truly yours, you should be able to summon only pleasant ones and dismiss painful ones at will. But the very fact that unwanted thoughts arise proves that ownership is imagined. Maharshi would say that the mind is like a machine operating according to past impressions. You are not the machine, you are the awareness in which the machine appears. The seeker then asked, "If I am not my thoughts, then what am I?" Maharshi was careful here. He did not rush to define the self. He knew that definitions become new thoughts to cling to. Instead, he would say, "Find out." Not by thinking, but by turning attention toward the sense of being itself. The simple feeling of I am, before it attaches to any story. When attention rests there, thoughts still arise, but they no longer claim ownership. They pass like echoes in an empty hall. Maharshi also warned that spiritual ideas themselves can become thoughts that enslave. Saying, "I am not the mind," can become another belief if it is not lived as direct seeing. That is why his teaching was relentlessly experiential. He did not ask seekers to adopt a new philosophy. He asked them to investigate what they already assume. When the assumption collapses, freedom is not achieved. It is revealed as what was always present. In this seeing, something profound happens. Thoughts lose their authority. They may still appear, but they no longer define you. Fear loses its grip because fear is always tied to a thought about a future or a memory of the past. When thoughts are seen as not yours, time loosens its hold. Maharshi said that peace is not produced by stopping thought. Peace is what remains when false identification ends. This is the great illusion Maharshi exposed, the illusion that you are the thinker of thoughts. Once this illusion is seen through, life continues. The mind functions, decisions are made, but there is no longer a psychological owner inside, anxiously managing every movement. What remains is a quiet, self-luminous presence that was never disturbed, even when the mind was loud. Maharshi did not offer comfort to the ego. He offered truth to those ready to look. Your thoughts are not yours, not because they are bad, not because they must be destroyed, but because you were never confined to them. When this is seen, not believed but seen, the mind naturally falls silent, not as an achievement, but as a recognition. And in that recognition, you do not become something new. You simply remain as what you have always been before the first thought ever claimed, "This is mine."